Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Tonight, I'm Pat Burtis. I'm the chairman of the Climate Action Committee here in Corte Madera. We're very excited to have you here to talk about a very exciting topic, which is hot water heaters. We're obviously talking about heat pump water heaters tonight. Before we start, I just wanted to ask, we have quite a few people who've joined online. Thank you for joining as well. During the presentation, if you could kindly make sure you're muted and turn your cameras off, that would be great. And then we will have an opportunity for Q&A both in person and online at the end, at which point feel free to turn on your cameras as well. We started a little bit late because we understand there's some very bad traffic out there. We wanted to make sure people had a chance to get here. We'll hopefully have a few more people trickling in as we go along. So as mentioned, I'm Pat Burtis. I'm chair of the Climate Action Committee. I've been involved for about a year and a half. We're a committee of 7 people at the moment. I'll talk a little bit about what we actually do. In terms of my life outside of the Climate Action Committee member, I'm an investor and an executive in climate tech companies, mostly high-tech companies trying to do things to abate climate emissions. Some adaptation as well. So I've been doing that for 20 years or so. But we're very pleased to be involved here at the local level with our town, Corte Madera, which is quite, as you know, progressive in terms of doing things to mitigate climate, and also now starting to wrestle with the adaptation aspect of it. So in any case, thanks for coming tonight. We have an interesting agenda. Before we dive in, we would love to get feedback from people. This is the first time we've done something like this where we have a very specific topic to talk about from the Climate Action Committee. We'd love to hear what you think about it. If you're a user of QR codes, go ahead and snap that one. There's also the URL link at the bottom, which is a mouthful, but I'll give you a few minutes. I will show this again at the end of the presentation, so you have a chance to grab it again. For those of you online, that should work as well. Either way, it's a very short, I think, 5-question survey. We really appreciate the feedback about how you heard about this and what you got out of it, and also what you'd like to hear about next time if we do another one of these events. So please do take 3 minutes to do that when we're done. I see a couple of phones up, so I'll wait a second to let you get that one. All good? Okay. Great. So from an agenda point of view, I'm going to do a very, very quick introduction about the Climate Action Committee. Then we'll talk sort of give some context around why we're actually talking about this topic within the context of the Climate Action Plan, which Corte Madera has in place. It's a very good one. If you have any interest, it was adopted in 2020, I think. We do an annual update to that with priorities for the town to pursue a course of action to make sure that we mitigate the emissions from Corte Madera. We have a target of, Phoebe's going to correct me here, 40% reduction by 2040, right, 40 by 40, 40% reduction in emissions by 2040. We're making very good progress, actually. There's some other data available, I think, on the website about that. But one of the key things we wanted to focus on for this year and next year is heat pump water heaters. So we'll talk about that. We've got Karen Lang, who's another committee member, will be presenting a bit about how this fits into the plan. And then Mark Chabria, who's Green Building Coordinator for Marin County, will present, give you kind of a holistic overview of heat pump water heaters, how they work and so on. And then we're actually going to hear testimonials from 2 residents who've installed heat pump water heaters. One of them, Scott, is here, and myself, we actually installed one a year ago in our house. So I'll talk to you about that. And then we will have an opportunity for Q&A at the end. So I would just ask if you could hold your questions until the end. We'll have plenty of time to do that. I also forgot to mention that Phoebe Golden, who is our Climate Action and Adaptation Coordinator, will also be presenting some of the material as well. Phoebe is the glue that kind of keeps us together as a committee and makes sure that we liaise effectively with the town council, who we really report to at the end of the day. So the mission of the Climate Action Committee is to inspire, I'm sure you're very inspired, and lead the community and the town to take audacious steps towards zero greenhouse gas emissions. And this is an achievable goal. I think, as many of you know, this can be done, and we're making good progress on it. But that's our mission. In terms of what that translates to on a day-to-day basis, we make recommendations to the town council. So for those of you who are familiar with, for instance, the electrification building codes, the Climate Action Committee was instrumental in helping support the adoption of those. We have a role to promote community action. Events like this, for instance, we do table quite a number of events around town. There's a very good newsletter as well that talks about some things that people can do that are aligned with the climate action plan. And lastly, we support the town staff's connection with the Corte Madera community, and actually across the different agencies and organizations in the Bay Area, and particularly in Marin, where, as you know, we have a very active plan. It's both at the county level, but each of the individual towns within Marin County have committees and staff set up to do things like we're doing now. So there's a coordination element as well to what we do. So it's a 2-year term. So every year, if anybody has an interest to participate in the Climate Action Committee, we do get usually 1 or 2 people rolling off every year. So I'd encourage you to apply. I should mention that we also do have a student member of the committee. We have a student at Redwood who's actually a formal committee member, which is fantastic. We also have a student ambassador who also liaises with students to try to coordinate what's happening at mostly high school level, but also some lower grades, mostly high school with what's happening in town. So we're doing our best to kind of get the tentacles out there and make sure there's a coordinated course of action. So that's a quick overview on the committee itself. I'd like to hand over to Karen Lang now, who's another committee member, to give you some information about how the heat pump water heaters actually fit into the climate action plan itself and why it's important.
Thank you, Pat. Yes, I'm Karen Lang, and I'm a member of the Climate Action Committee. I've served for about 1.5 years, like Pat. I've been retired for about 6 years, but prior to that, I was in the energy industry for 40 time. The last couple of years of my career, I worked on analyses to see how we could get California back to 1990 greenhouse gas levels. And in the analysis, it became quite apparent that all sectors of the economy, including residential, really need to make a shift. And so with that, we're going to look at Corte Madera's greenhouse gas emissions. And this chart shows Corte Madera GHG emissions in 2022. I think it's about the latest data. As you can see, the biggest chunk is from transportation, 71%. Mainly from gasoline consumed in light-duty vehicles or cars, basically. Then you look at electricity, a small sliver, 5%. And the reason that's only 5% is in Corte Madera and California as a whole, electricity generation is pretty clean. Solar, wind, hydro, nuclear really constitutes the majority of the generation. So when you use electricity, doesn't generate much GHG. Built-in environment for natural gas up there, which really means natural gas consumed in buildings, 21%. So you might think why we're not focused on transportation tonight, and that's because Corte Madera is pretty well along in meeting our goals. The town has a goal of having, I believe it's 30% of vehicles owned by Corte Madera residents to be EVs by 2030. Is that right? And in the last couple of years, new purchases of vehicles by Corte Madera residents, almost half have been EVs. So if that trend continues, we're well on our way to meeting our goal. So then we're down to the next biggest contributor, which is natural gas in buildings. So looking a little more closely at natural gas in buildings in Corte Madera, we'll see 75% is consumed in residential buildings, 25% in commercial. You zero in more on the residential, you see that water heating is responsible for 59% of the emissions, space heating 32%. And while on a given winter day, certainly your space heater is consuming more natural gas, your water heater runs all year round, hence the larger proportion. So That's why tonight we're focused on trying to replace that gas water heater with an electric heat pump. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Phoebe, who's going to talk more about what happens in our town.
Thank you, Karen, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Phoebe Golden. I'm the town's Climate Action and Adaptation Coordinator. So I work on a variety of sustainability projects for the town, everything from supporting our Climate Action Committee to working on shoreline flood protection and installing EV charging stations in our public spaces. And one of the projects that I've worked on while I've been with the town is working to replace gas water heaters in town buildings. So we'll be hearing later on from some residents who have replaced their gas water heaters with heat pump water heaters. And just wanted to start off by showcasing that this is a technology that's also in use in town buildings. So in 2023, the town took advantage of a program that's offered by MCE and PG&E together to replace at no cost to the town gas water heaters with heat pump water heaters. So in that year, 5 gas water heaters in the community center and 2 of our fire stations were replaced with heat pumps. And then, of course, we're all sitting tonight in our beautiful new town hall building, which is all electric. So our hot water here also comes from a heat pump water heater, and that's the one that's pictured there. So just wanted to kick off by saying that, it's not just the town that's encouraging residents to adopt this technology. It's really something that the town has embraced and is implementing in all of our buildings as much as possible to reduce town emissions. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Mark Chabria. Mark is the Green Building Coordinator for the Marin County Sustainability Team, and he's led the Electrify Marin program since 2019, which has supported hundreds of Marin residents in their transition away from fossil fuels in their homes. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, Mark, and I'll pass it over to you.
First thing I'm going to do is get rid of this big picture of me. Yikes. No, that's okay. Thank you. So yeah, thank you, Phoebe. I'm Mark Chabria. I'm a sustainability program coordinator for the County of Marin. And we launched the Electrify Marin program back in 2019, which gives rebates to homeowners who are interested in switching out gas appliances for efficient electric ones. And so in the past 5 years that we've been running that program, we've supported several hundred Marin residents with their heat pump water heater transitions. So we're going to hear later from homeowners who have made that transition, but I just kind of want to give you an overview of the technology and some things to think about if you're considering moving in that direction. It's true that we don't really talk about water heaters very much because we don't care about them. We really care that we have hot water in our houses, right? But we really don't care where it comes from. So I appreciate everybody coming and giving some thought to it tonight. So heat pumps are something that we've been hearing a lot more about in the past few years, like seemingly kind of out of nowhere. And Karen gave us a little background that that explains why. Heat pumps really support our climate action goals. We have a big chunk of our greenhouse gas emissions that locally in the community that come from burning gas in our home appliances. Heat pumps, whether they're used for heating water or heating our homes, it's the highest possible efficiency. It's the absolute most efficient way to heat those things. And it makes electrification cost effective, right? Because on a per unit basis, electricity is more expensive than gas, right? So if we're switching from gas, which is a cheaper fuel generally, to electricity, we want to make sure that we're using the most efficient possible electric appliance that it's going to cost us the least to operate. Lots of other benefits to heat pumps too, though. They can make our homes more comfortable. They can improve our indoor air quality if we're getting rid of that combustion from the picture. And then, of course, reducing fire risks by not having an open flame attached to all of our appliances is sort of a no-brainer. And so, heat pump water heaters specifically, if you've never seen one, they look a whole lot like a regular gas water heater that you probably have in your home right now, except there's a little heat pump mechanism on top that is essentially taking heat from the surrounding air and amplifying it using a refrigerant and heating the water. So there's no flame inside the water heater. There's no electric heating element that's directly creating heat. It's just moving heat from one place to another. And that's really the key to its efficiency. Of course, heat pump water heaters are all electric, which means that we can use the solar energy that we're producing on our rooftops or the wonderful 100% renewable electricity that we're purchasing from MCE to heat our water. Heat pump water heaters are really high performing, meaning they make hot water, which is the most important thing. And they're also flexible, all kinds of ways to set the machine to be heating water at certain times. You can set it to heat during the times where electricity is the cheapest. They come these days really in a range of sizes, ranging from 30 gallons up to 80 gallons for a larger household or larger commercial sizes as well. And now heat pump water heaters also come in options of 240 or 120 volts. And that can be important depending, we'll get to why that's important in just a minute. These days, most plumbers do install heat pump water heaters. Back in 2019, when we first started really promoting this technology in the county, there were like 3 plumbers who had the expertise to do it, and now pretty much all of them do. Heat pump water heaters also tend to have longer warranties than gas water heaters. Oftentimes, gas water heaters will have like a 6-year or something like that. Usually heat pump water heaters have a 10-year warranty. And we've also got some pretty sizable rebates on heat pump water heaters that I'm going to talk about a little bit more too. But one of the things, of course, that's really important if you're thinking about switching to a heat pump water heater is cost. And, I wish that this slide was a little bit more clear and more simple than it is. But the fact is, like, everybody's home is different and everybody is starting from a different place in terms of their suitability for installing a heat pump water heater in their home. So the equipment cost is the really easy part of this equation, right? I can look on Home Depot's website and find a good 50 or 65 gallon heat pump water heater made by a big manufacturer like A.O. Smith or Rheem, and for about $1,700 they're listed on there. Operating costs are pretty simple as well. Even though electricity is a little more expensive than gas, the efficiency in the heat pump water heater offsets that and results in operating costs being really very similar to your gas water heater. And installation costs is where it gets a little bit more complicated, right? And so maybe starting around $1,800 or so, it would depend on the need for electrical work in your home. You may or may not have a 240 volt circuit or outlet available in the place where your water heater is located. In some cases, people have found that they've had to upsize their electric service panel, although that's really not very common. There's a need for ventilation because these water heaters they move heat from the surrounding air. They can't be cooped up in a little tiny closet like your gas water heater might be, right? They need access to 700 to 1,000 cubic feet of air to pull heat out. And in some cases, people have needed to relocate their in order to accommodate a heat pump water heater, and that can be expensive as well. So I would say like overall range for a project is probably 3,500 to as high as 9,500. I always tell people to get multiple quotes because estimates can range pretty widely for these kinds of projects. But the good news is that there are a bunch of rebates and incentives available, right? So I'm just going to call out. Oh yeah, sorry. I'm just going to call out 3 of the incentives that are available right now. One is from Electrify Marin, our program at the county that's available to all Marin residents. Has a a base incentive of $500, and for low-income households, it goes up to $2,000. There's a statewide program called Tech Clean California. Not quite available yet. It's launching on December 10th, which is in just a couple of days, which would be an additional $1,100 that you could stack on top of what you're getting from Electrify Marin. And then additionally, federal tax credits for $2,000. So I want to acknowledge that rebates and incentives kind of like they come and go, and it's fairly complicated and a little bit chaotic. We're going to be seeing soon in the coming weeks or months additional incentives available funded by the Inflation Reduction Act, but they're not quite ready yet for heat pump water heaters. So this is just kind of a snapshot of what's available right now. I would point you to a couple of great rebate directories that are out there that can help you figure out exactly what's available for your project. One is from a great website called the Switches On, switcheson.org. There's a great rebate finder in there. And then MCE also has a great rebate finder on their site. So just some things to consider, I would say, if you're thinking about getting a heat pump water heater, and maybe the items on these lists can help you formulate some questions to ask of a contractor if they're coming out to do an estimate. But things to think about are the location of the unit, right? Is it going to need to be moved? Heat pump water heaters tend to be a little bit taller than gas storage tank water heaters. So again, if you're restricted in a water heater closet, you might need to make some adjustments to that. Again, you need that ventilation space. So that might mean putting some, replacing your water heater closet door with a slatted door. Heat pump water heaters tend to make the area they're placed in a little bit cooler, and they also dehumidify the area a little bit. So if water heater is in your laundry room or in your garage, like that's probably fine and doesn't matter at all. But there may be some locations where that would be an issue. And then electrical supply. So is there an outlet to plug the thing into in the place where where your water heater currently is? Another issue is recovery time. So heat pump water heaters tend to, when the water's gone from the tank, it tends to take a little bit longer to reheat the tank with water than a gas water heater or electric resistance water heater does. To compensate for that, many people get slightly bigger tanks than their existing model. So a lot of people who have 50-gallon water heaters are getting 65-gallon heat pump water heaters just to make sure that they have the supply that they need. Heat pump water heaters make a little bit of noise as well. It's, I think the actual decibel level was described as 2 times as loud as a refrigerator. Kind of like it's hard to imagine. But not super loud, but there is some noise. And so the placement of the water heater might, impact whether, will affect whether that impacts you or not. Electrical capacity, if you, is there room in your service panel to accommodate another electrical appliance? And then, of course, another thing to consider is the higher upfront cost, very much offset by all of these different rebates and incentives that are available, which is great. But still, it's still a fact that the upfront cost is higher. So a couple of resources that I wanted to share with you all, assuming that some of you are looking to probably get started with a heat pump water heater project. If you're already sold on the idea and that your home is a good, the location of your current water heater is well suited to be replaced with a heat pump water heater, then really you just need to find a contractor. And the best place to do that is the Switches On contractor directory, that second box there. They have a really great directory that will show you that there are many, many, many contractors who are, serving Corte Madera with heat pump water heater service. One of the best things about that directory is that it has little labels next to the contractors' names that indicate the rebate networks that they are part of. So in order to, access, the maximum amount of rebates available for your project, you're going to want to work with a contractor that is enrolled in a program called Tech Clean California. And that certifies them essentially to connect you with the rebates that are funded by the Inflation Reduction Act. So definitely check that out. But then, another thing, if you still have more questions and are still kind of doing your research, the county has put together a resource hub on the Electrify Marin website. It's marincounty.gov/electrify. And there's a whole bunch of things that will probably be useful to you there. We have some guidance, step-by-step guide on how to electrify your home. We have, again, those contractor directories listed there. We have incentive finders. We have some concierge services listed there as well. If you just if you want somebody to just work as a third party and kind of take all of the guesswork out of all of this for you and connect you with the rebates, there are some services that will do that, and some of them are free. Energy audits are available and can be a really great way for you to prioritize different home energy projects. Somebody called me today and was wondering, should I replace my furnace or should I replace my water heater? And I was like, oh, well, which one is closer to, the end of its useful life? Let's, there are some good ways that you can prioritize, and energy audits can help you with that. We have some good resources on how to avoid an expensive service panel upgrade while electrifying. And then some general stuff about project planning, lists of questions to ask your contractor, and lots of other educational resources. So check that out, the Electrify Marin Resource Hub. I actually left some flyers for it at the table back. So I think we're not quite asking questions yet. Super excited to hear from the Corte Madera residents who have actually made this transition, and look forward to answering questions a little bit later.
Thank you so much, Mark. And as Mark said, we'll now be turning over to the resident testimonials. So we have two residents with us tonight that have already installed heat pump water heaters, and they're going to share their experiences and what the process was like for them. And just a quick disclaimer before we get to that, the views of the speakers are not representing the views of the town, and they're not an endorsement of any specific vendor or contractor. They're just here for information, and we really appreciate them sharing their experiences. So I will turn it over to Scott for the first testimonial.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. So I'm Scott Shell. I'm an architect. I did a bunch of work on building electrification. I did a bunch of all electric buildings, including a bunch of schools in Marin and the Exploratorium in San Francisco. This is our house in Mariner Cove. Looks like every other house in Mariner Cove, about 2,000 square feet. This is our old water heater and our old condensing gas furnace. It's in our garage, like most water heaters in Corte Madera. You'll see the flue going out. Those things often leak, so I was glad to get rid of that. You'll see the yellow gas line there. I was happy to get rid of that with all the fires we have here. And I just wanted to point out, you see that condensing furnace drain from the furnace there? You need a drain for your heat pump water heater. And there are several in your garage already, most likely, if you have a condensing furnace or if you have a washing machine. So you can connect to those really cheaply. This is our heat pump water heater installed. We moved it because we wanted to make more space and recover space where our former appliance was for a closet, which we desperately needed for our entry. We actually did this in a couple of different stages. We had an electrician coming out to do some lighting work and to put in a car charger. So we had him go ahead and run the circuit at that same time, even though we weren't ready to put in the water heater. He was out there already, and we just said, hey, just run that circuit and then we'll be ready and we won't have to call you back. You'll see the air intake and exhaust here, these two silver ducts. We did not put those in originally. On the top one, that's the air intake that goes into the heat pump, and the one coming off the side is the exhaust. The air coming out of that exhaust is cold because it's the heat's going into the water and that cold air is coming out. So that was cooling down the garage, which was great in the summer. But during COVID, my wife started working out there and it was getting too cold in the winter. So I put these two exhausts in myself and stubbed them up into the attic. You'll see that condensate drain, the white PVC pipe, that goes back to the laundry drain. So that was really simple and cheap and easy to install. So from my perspective, it's a pretty simple thing. You have water coming in and water going out, like on any other hot water heater. You have electric coming in, which I think all new water heaters are required to have anyway. It does have to be 220, so you got to get that in there. And then you have the strain. Otherwise, it's just a water heater. It should take a few hours to install. We got the Rheem 50-gallon. We did this in 2018. I called 3 different plumbers. None of them knew what it was, but they all came out and they said, oh, yeah, water's in here, water's out there. And all of them gave me a quote. They weren't worried about it. It was a little bit cheaper than we did it. At the time, Home Depot would deliver for free. The price goes up and down a little bit with sales. Here's our quote from the electrician. You can see the other things. We had this car charger thing installed and a few other things, but he charged us $450 to run that circuit. The heat pump water heater, after you add in tax and delivery in today's prices, would be about $1,900 for this one. The electrical was $450. And the plumber, I can't remember what he charged us, but it was less than $1,200, I'm sure. He was in and out of there in well less than a day. It's just not a lot of work. We got some rebates, but I don't remember what they are. It was 2018. These were the stickers on the energy guide. So I was a little interested to hear you say that the price was different, was about the same, the operating cost. I don't know what the operating cost is. I'm just going by these stickers, but the gas one said $317 on the sticker on the front, and the 50-gallon heat pump water heater says $117. So that's $200 a year in savings. We've been happy with it. Okay, so key advice. I have so many friends and colleagues who wanted to install electric appliances, and their water heater went out. And there's, oh, darn it, I've got to find an electrician and a plumber and get that water heater delivered while we have no hot water heater. And you just can't survive more than a day or two without hot water. Your family will just go bonkers. So my advice is to go ahead and plan ahead. If you ask Google, water heater lasts 10 to 12 years. And if you ask Google, how old is my water heater, it tells you how to look that up. You can look on your water heater serial number, and there's a code on there that tells you when it was made, so you can tell how old it is. If it's 10 years old, it's time to replace it. Don't wait until you have an emergency, because then you won't be able to last long enough to get all that stuff done. Home Depot is right now showing, this was last night, showing delivery on December 10th to 13th. Trust me, you can't wait 10 days for hot water. So plan ahead. If you have an electrician coming out, go ahead and have them run the circuit. Just be ready for it. So with that, I will close. We've been real happy with it. And, as an architect doing lots of building electrification, for me, it's absolutely clear. It's the lowest cost way to make the biggest reduction in your carbon footprint. And we've seen here in Marin the impacts of the fires and everything else. That's why we had to change out our furnace to go to a heat pump so we could get air conditioning, because we can't open our windows during smoky nights anymore. So we've been real happy with it and recommend it to all of you. Thank you.
That was great. It's so good to hear somebody else's experience. I'm about to share ours. Again, as Phoebe said, this is just our personal experience here. They're not representing the town during this little presentation here. But we did ours about a year ago. I just wanted to mention that since you did yours and we did ours, there's now actually MCE, Marine Clean Energy, now has a program that will pay for you to get a loaner water heater, if your water heater dies and you have that 10-day wait until you can get the heat pump water heater, Green Clean Energy will actually pay your contractor to install and deinstall a loaner water heater. So don't panic. I mean, it's not good if your water heater dies, but there are options to deal with it and kind of fill that gap time until you get the heat pump water heater. So, which is a key issue. But, so yeah, we had I think in some ways a similar experience, but with some differences as well. So happy to share this. And yeah, I guess our own disclaimer would be obviously this is just one household, so don't take our experience as universal. I've actually have done some cost modeling, some savings modeling here over the 11 months that we've owned it. And that was our experience. It doesn't necessarily translate. Your mileage may vary, I think, as they say. So just for context, we're in a probably not dissimilar house. We're up in East Corte Madera hillside, 1964 vintage house. It's a 3-bed plus an office, 2.5 bath, about 2,100 square feet. We did a remodel in 2018 where we got most of the LED lighting. Unfortunately, a new gas furnace, so we weren't thinking about heat pump space heating at the time. It would have been a great opportunity had it been a few years later, but unfortunately, we now have a 6-year-old gas furnace, which works great. We improved the insulation and we did upgrade our panel for that, and also we then got solar put in later, so we did do a kind of a double panel upgrade. Which was important because we had one of those 50-year-old Zinsco 100 amp panels before, and I think this would have been a challenge if we still had that. So there's only 3 occupants, and so this is, as you'll see, we're probably over provisioned for what we ended up with, but we were partly because the rebates that were available kind of steered us that way, for better or worse. And also we were thinking, well, when we go to sell the house, it's quite likely that the next family will have 4 or 5 or even 6 people, given that we have potentially a 4-bedroom house here with the office converted. So it was a little bit of thinking ahead. We had a gas-fired water heater that was 17 years old. It was 45 gallons. It's actually working great. So we didn't have an emergency situation, but I was aware of the rebates that were out there. And as you'll see, they were extremely compelling. And so we just went ahead and did it almost exactly a year ago, actually. The rest of the house, we have gas furnace, as I mentioned, gas range and gas dryer, and everything else is electric. We have 100% green electrons. We were customers of Deep Green MCE. And then in 2021, we installed a solar system with a battery. So from a carbon point of view, we are completely, the electricity piece of things, we're not emitting any carbon. And we did utilize, as I think what Mark called a concierge service. I called it an aggregator basically, but there are a couple of companies out there which advertise effectively the electrification, decarbonization of your home. They'll do all the research on which incentives and which products to use, and they will refer you to a contractor and also tell you and qualify you for the incentives. So this probably sounds a little mystifying. I think when we go through all the detail, it seems a little bit intimidating in terms of a process, but there are people out there who can help. Mark highlighted some very good resources from the county, but there are also some companies out there which will do this for you. They don't charge you, the resident. They actually effectively get paid a referral fee by the contractor to do that. So there are easy ways to do this. We spent very little time and energy on this project, which was a huge relief. So that's how we went about it. There were some constraints. The first one was our mechanical closet. So it's interesting to hear Mark say that you can't put these in a small closet, because we did. So maybe that was a mistake, but seems to be working fine. We had both our old gas water heater and our furnace it's an interior closet that's just off our media room. So it was not optimal. And I would love to talk to the people who designed these houses in 1960s, but in any case, not optimal, but we wanted to work with what we had, because to move the mechanicals outside would have been very expensive. And our garage also does not have the necessary electrical circuit to do this there. So we decided to use the space we had. The second constraint, as I mentioned, was only a few models were available for the big incentives. So we kind of got pushed into 2 options. The first one was a 40-gallon hybrid heat pump water heater, which would have required a 60 amp circuit. Now the hybrid, what that means is you have the heat pump that Mark talked about, which is this super efficient compressor system. Basically, it's like a refrigerator operating in reverse, which is taking ambient air, compressing that down and generating heat with that. But it also has an on-demand heating element. which consumes a lot of electricity. But if you run out of hot water and you need hot water fast, you turn this thing on and you can heat up a tank quite quickly. But that requires a 60 amp circuit, which we did not have in this closet. So the other option was just the heat pump water heater with an 80-gallon tank to ensure that we would never run out of water. And that used the existing 30 amp circuit with the ventilation and drainage that we already had in place. So bigger than we need for a 3-person family. But again, this is kind of where the incentives kicked in, was at that 80-gallon tank. And also, as I said, in case the next buyer has more people in the household, it could be useful for that. So at the end of the day, we went with the 80-gallon using the existing 30 amp circuit. It does fit. It's a tight fit. You can see the before on the left. That's our old 45-gallon tank. And here's the 80-gallon next to our gas furnace. So it is tight, but it did just squeeze in there, which was great. In terms of results, works great. Water's very hot, 140 degrees. We have never run out with that 80-gallon tank, as you can imagine. On the noise point that Mark brought up, so they're rated for 49 decibels, which is approximately a sort of soft conversation. So it's not particularly noticeable from that point of view. What we have found is there's a high-pitched whine, which can be irritating. And so we did have to do some additional soundproofing. We had some soundproofing in there already because the furnace is in there. When that thing turns on, it's like a big roar. But we had to add some different type of soundproofing. It was pretty simple. It just took some baffles and a couple of blankets to kind of dull down that high-pitched whine, which kicks in occasionally. And at this point, it's largely unnoticeable. You can hear a little bit. We've kind of gotten used to it. It's not a big deal from our point. Obviously, if you can put this thing in your basement or in your garage or outside, that will be better. But in this case, we were able to make it work in a very central part of our house, and it seems to work fine. In terms of, what happens if the power goes out? Do you lose your hot water? We're fortunate to have the solar and the battery, so we don't have to worry about that. It is a possible downside of a heat pump water heater. However, as I think Mark pointed out, actually pretty much all of the new gas-powered water heaters also require electricity to operate properly. So one way or the other, if you need a new water tank, you're probably not going to get away from the requirement to have a constant electrical circuit. So something to think about. And then it does pump a little bit of cold air into the hallway under the bottom of the door. Again, it's you wouldn't notice it unless you're looking for it. So, but overall, it's worked great for us. In terms of cost, we were at the upper end of what Mark. What is the range? As I mentioned, very large tank. It was also a little bit of a complicated installation given the tight space, but the incentives were incredible, which is why we just pulled the trigger on it at the time, even though our current hot water heater was working fine. So $1,000 incentive for the contractor from Bayren. The Tech Clean California rebate was $3,800. A lot of these kind of come and go, as Mark alluded to. So obviously you may not find all of these if you go look for them today, but keep an eye on what's out there. 900 from the Golden State rebate, 500 from Electrify Marin, and then the federal tax credit for 2,000. So at the end of the day, we paid $1,300 for a new water heater, which was hard to resist given that ours was 17 years old at that time. Okay, there's a lot on this slide, but I wanted to try to get a grasp on sort of the trade-off of the gas versus the electricity and whether we were saving money or not. So the top chart is our gas usage year over year. So it's months across 2023, and the red bars are 2024. And as you can see, our gas usage went down very significantly once we installed the water heater. So this is 11 months of actual data. Not surprisingly, we were using more gas to heat water in the winter months because everything's colder. What was really remarkable to me was in the summertime, we're using almost no gas now. That's basically just our range and our dryer. So we're using 2 therms a month. Summertime, it's almost nothing. So we had significant savings in gas, 54% reduction in gas usage. On the flip side, we are using more electricity because this is an electrical powered appliance. That's about a 25% increase in electricity over the same time period. We think it's pretty much all due to the water heater. We can't think of anything else that changed that in particular. So that was kind of the energy source trade-off. In terms of what that means in terms of dollars, so this is a little bit of a complicated chart, but the blue bars are the dollar savings from the reduction in gas usage month by month. The red is the increase in spend based on our electricity, and then the green is the net savings month by month. Now, I should mention that our electricity bill is complicated because of our solar. So it's a little tricky to put a number on it. Won't go into all the details, but I did my best to try to approximate what we would pay if we were using, grid sourced electricity. But the net of it is we're saving about $40 a month by using this, averaged over the year. Obviously, as you can see, it's up to $100 in February, and not very much in the summer months, but quite significant. So we've saved, we think, $435 through the first 11 months of this year with the heat pump water heater. We've also avoided about 1.3 tons of CO2 emitted over the course of the year, which, assuming a 10-year life, is like 13 tons, which is pretty significant. So back to what Karen was saying at the beginning, if you look at sort of the emissions from Corte Madera, once you tackle transport, this is the next big thing to go after, and you can really put a significant dent in it. So from a savings point of view, we're super happy. From an emissions point of view, we're super happy. And I tried to calculate a simple payback calculation in a fairly conservative scenario here, where I assumed, again, this quite expensive heat pump water heater, and I only assumed the $2,000 tax credit. So $7,500 net cost. I estimated $5,000 for a gas powered water heater, which may be too expensive, but with installation and everything, I think it's not totally out of the ballpark. So if you have an incremental cost of $2,500 and you're saving $400 to $500 a year, that's a payback of about 5 years. In our case, it was a lot faster because, as you saw, we got many more rebates than that. So we ended up paying very little for it. But I think in a very generic sense, almost like a worst case scenario, which is you buy the most expensive heat pump water heater and you get almost no rebates, it still pays for itself, at least in our experience. So we've been very happy with it. Of course, with all sort of house projects, there's always a few glitches and things you need to deal with. But at the end of the day, no regrets whatsoever from our point of view. So that's the two sort of resident testimonials, I guess. I just wanted to talk very quickly about kind of the why now question. So if you're considering doing this, what are the reasons to do this? And then we'll move into the Q&A. I guess the first thing I would say, which isn't really on the slide actually, is don't wait till your water heater breaks. So, if you've got one that's 10 or 15 years old, given the incentives today, it probably makes sense to just go ahead and do it. That was kind of our thinking, because you're going to have to do it in the next couple of years. So there are rebates and tax credits available today. They may not be quite soon. We don't know what's going to happen to the federal rebate, obviously, tax credit. But even more so, these incentives are intended to start big and decline over time. It will actually become mandatory if you have to replace a water heater after 2027, you will have to put a heat pump water heater in. So they will no longer have incentives, presumably, because it's going to be required in Marin. So now's the time if you're thinking about it. The other thing is just, from a kind of psychological perspective, these things last a long time. So it's better to just get on with it and make that decision, get the benefit, both the savings as well as the greenhouse gas emissions. Needless to say, we're in a fairly critical situation here from climate change. So the sooner we can act, the better. And then lastly, there are a lot of resources available. This is a topic, as we've heard about tonight. There's lots to rely on, and lots of help that can be had as you make your decision and evaluation. So before we jump to the Q&A, I just wanted to remind you again, if you didn't get a chance to scan the QR code and give us some feedback on tonight's event and what you'd like to see going forward, that would be much appreciated. I will just pause there for 15 seconds. For the Q&A, everybody here who's spoken is available for your questions. If you're here in person and you have a question, please come to the podium, because the people online won't be able to hear you otherwise. You have to speak into the microphone. We could pass the mic around. That's a good solution. Also wanted to mention that we have Scotty Morrill here from the town building department. Scotty is our town building inspector. He actually inspected ours when it was installed. So he'll have a great depth of knowledge here about about, what needs to happen in terms of getting this put in there. So with that, unless Phoebe tells me I forgot to mention anything else, we will move on to the Q&A. I think we'll start, if there's any in-person, any folks here would like to come up or have a question, I can bring you the mic. You have one? Sure.
So my name is Eric Gunther. I'm an architect, and my wife is an architect as well. We live over in Marina Village, so not too far away. We installed a heat pump water heater 2 years ago now in our garage, and Scotty actually came and inspected it. When he first came out, he was unsure of how we had to vent it. It's in our garage. And I did a lot of research ahead of time. I did the Resilient Neighborhoods program. I went to the greenhouses program year after year. I got 3 bids from 3 different contractors, one of which was from the Green Homes program. So I knew some of the, the drawbacks and the potential things. It's in my garage, and it is noisier than I expected. We have a fully insulated garage, but you can hear it inside the house. It's also, as people mentioned, it's cooled the garage down so much that my kids cannot work out in the garage anymore. So it's much colder than I expected. It's I've calculated my PG&E bills, and my PG&E bills, if you consider both electric and gas together, from the year before we installed the heat pump water heater, the year after, they went up 43%. The first year I didn't save any gas at all. I have a gas furnace and a gas log fireplace that we use occasionally. But I went through my bills here, and I'm using less this year, but my bills, my monthly average for the year went from $193 in 2022 to $277. And this year I'm on track for $290. So I've had no savings at all from this heat pump water heater. And I just find it unique because everyone says that you're going to save money. It's, cost effective. And that's not my experience at all. And I've gone back to my contractor, and they've said nothing is wrong. They've come out and checked it. They've said nothing is wrong. So I don't know why my situation is different than what all these other people are coming in with. So that's my experience. Would not recommend it.
It's good to have different perspectives. So thank you for sharing that. I wonder how much of the increase were you able to back out the increases in rates from PG&E to equilibrate that? Yeah, I mean, they're going up rapidly. That may be part of it, but why do you think the gas went up? Okay. I wouldn't think that'd be related to the water heater, but okay. Well, as we said, your mileage may vary, so it's good to hear a different perspective. So, okay, should we go to Q&A?
Yeah, if there's anyone on Zoom that would like to ask a question, you can use the raise hand function on Zoom, or you can put your question in the chat and I'll read it out. And just make sure that if you're sending a chat, you're sending it to everyone. I think someone might have sent one to one of the Corte Maderas, but not the overall group chat.
That's my question. Yeah. Does the flue have to be stainless steel? No flue?
There is no flue here. There's no gas exhaust to vent out to the exterior.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Don't have a battery and the power goes out. What happens?
Mark, did you hear that question? If you don't have a battery and the power goes out, what happens?
mean, it's going to be a pretty similar situation to if a new gas water heater, which has an electric ignition in it as well, isn't going to operate when the power goes out either. So the heat pump water heaters, they're really well insulated, and they're going to keep the water in the tank hot for a day or so. But yes, correct. It's an electrical appliance, so it's not going to work if there's no electricity.
All right, we have a couple questions coming in on the Zoom. Rita is asking, how is a heat pump water heater better than a tankless water heater in terms of energy efficiency? Mark, or maybe Scotty, able to answer that?
Sure. So, so tankless water heaters are, generally tankless water heaters are gas. So are you asking about electric tankless water heaters, or I just want to make sure. Yeah, so a lot of building departments and certainly climate activists don't tend to promote gas tankless water heaters because they use a really, really big burst of gas in order to heat that water instantaneously. If you have really low hot water usage in your home, it could be a more efficient gas solution than a gas tank water heater for sure. But if you have like a house full of teenagers who are taking showers all the time and that kind of stuff, you could end up really using a whole lot more gas than you would in a tank gas water heater.
All right, a question from Joan. Is there a delay in getting hot water to the farthest point in the house, or is that delay better than with a gas water heater?
Help you there.
Yeah, I think that
It's the same.
yeah, it's just a tankless, or it's a tank water heater. The only difference is how it's fueled. Allison asks, this is a question for Scotty. What permits are required to install a heat pump water heater, and what are the costs for the permits?
There is no change in the permitting process based on the fuel or how the unit's powered. It's the same process. In most cases, we can turn around these permits in a pretty quick time. Workload permitting, you can always come down to town hall on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 9 and 12, and we can assist you over the counter, and may be possible to send you out the door with a permit for the water heater. Costs aren't any different, the same. I don't have the exact numbers. That can be discussed in person with our permit technicians. So really, there is no change at all from the building side, the permitting side. There just might be some changes that Pat and Mark had talked about with where you locate it.
Great. Cheryl asks, what year does the mandatory replacement with a heat pump kick in? And for heat pump water heaters, that is 2027 in the 9 Bay Area counties. And that's a Bay Area Air Quality Management District regulation regulating NOx emissions. And we have a comment from Ken Chen. From Alan, there are 120 volt heat pump water heaters available from Rheem and A.O. Smith and possibly others. Their efficiency numbers fall a bit short of the 240 units. So yes, calling out that there are heat pumps that can function on a 120 volt outlet.
I'd just like to chime in on two things. The last time I looked at the 120 volt, which has been a little while, they had a slow recovery. So I would be cautious about that. The other point that I think bears emphasizing is this the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. has said that you're not going to be able to not going to be able to sell gas powered appliances, heat pumps in 2027. So if yours gives out then, you're not going to be able to replace it. So that's why I'm encouraging people to go ahead and get ready and make the change now. So you're not doing it in 2027 in an emergency when you'll just be stuck.
Any other questions, either online or in person? Nope. Yes, yes, okay.
If you have a forced air furnace, is there a way to heat your house with electricity to switch over from gas from a forced air furnace to electrical heating?
Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe we'll have another evening when we talk about heat pumps for space heating. So they do have heat pumps as well that will both heat and cool your home with a single efficient electric appliance. So the Electrify Marin program since 2019 has offered similar rebates for replacing a gas furnace with an electric heat pump system. And there are also incentives coming from, state, regional, and federal sources for that project as well.
Can you give me a quick idea of what the process is, switch over from forced air to heat pump?
Yeah, I mean, the systems come in different configurations, but most commonly, you would replace if you have a ducted furnace that's like running through an existing ducting system in your home, you would essentially just replace that unit with an indoor heat pump air handler unit. And then outside the home, you would install a condenser unit, which looks like an outdoor, sort of fan AC unit. And it would, heat your home, and then you could run it in reverse to cool your home as well.
All right.
All right, we have a couple other questions on heat pump space heaters on the Zoom. Cheryl asks, is there a way to combine a heat pump water heater and space heater? And does it make sense to install both at the same time?
So there's a company, and of course, because I work for a government agency, we don't promote or endorse particular products or manufacturers or anything like that. But there's a company called Harvest Thermal that makes heat pump systems that provide domestic hot water as well as heating and cooling for the home. And it definitely can make sense to do both of those things at once if you're like, especially if your furnace and your gas water heater are like kind of at the end of their useful life, both at the same time. So the Harvest Thermal system is a more streamlined system that works off of a single outdoor condenser, right? To do home heating and water heating.
And the second question was, does it make sense to install both at the same time, both a heat pump water heater and a space heater? That's really going to depend on everyone's home situation. But
yeah, that's what I would say. It sounded like you did replace both at the same time. Did you not? No? Okay, sorry.
I think, Scott, you mentioned that you later replaced your furnace with a heat pump.
We did it at a separate time, and it was a direct results of that summer we had those wildfires, and we couldn't keep our windows open at night because of the smoke, and it was just unlivable. And so we needed the AC, and we wanted to decarbonize, and so we replaced our furnace with a heat pump.
I'll also add that there are several contractors serving the Bay Area that do both HVAC and plumbing projects. And so, yeah, I mean, you may end up saving a little bit of money by doing both at the same time. These driving around all over the Bay Area cost them a lot of money. And sometimes the more projects that they're doing at a single property, they'll give you a little bit of a discount. So it could make sense for sure.
I appreciate the comments you made about the cost because we just did a major remodel and went to induction, electric range, heat pump, furnace, everything. And our PG&E bill for just the water heater was $79 basically all the time. And I thought, well, that's a lot. That's all we're running. So if you say every story is different, I mean, I'd love to get that down lower. It's not the end of the world. It's $79, but is this going to lower my bill just on that water furnace that we have now? You know, that's, I mean, I know you can't quite answer it, but I'm happy to do the right thing and move over to it. But it's just kind of, is it, you know, apples to apples? Will it be cheaper? It's a kind of a question. But I know it's not, it's a rhetorical question, especially after hearing those comments. And is there a technical answer? You can, well, this therms is this, it heats at this, that, blah, blah, blah.
So I can't address the specific situation that you're in. The thing I look at are those energy stickers on the front because they go through a very, very rigorous testing process that's equal baseline to baseline. So I kind of trust that for the basic technology. I worry a little bit that, I thought that all heat pump water heaters had electric resistance element in them. Is that not correct? Yeah, only the hybrid ones. Okay. So I thought they all had that electric resistance in it. Apparently not. But that if you have your temperature set too low, then that electric resistance may be kicking on a lot more commonly, a lot more frequently than it should be. And that will shoot your bill up really fast because the heat pump is, 3 or 4 times more efficient than the electric resistance. So if that electric resistance element is going on because you are emptying your tank, because you don't have the temperature set high enough, that element could be going off and that could really run up in a hurry.
Another thing I've seen that might help is you're going to be doing a project that's not going to be $100, right? So you're going to be going a few $1,000s into it, maybe in some cases more. But what I've seen that to complement the efficiency of these systems is to have your plumber while he's there is insulate all your hot water piping in the house that's accessible. Another option, if you can afford it, is to get a water recirculation pump in line with your hot water system. And what that does, it's going to keep the run of the piping between the water heater and your bathroom on the second floor at the far end. It's going to be heated all the way through. And so there will be a constant, may not be piping hot, but it won't be cooling down. And again, so that'll reduce the work of the water heater. And the recirc pump, I couldn't tell you cost, but you do. And insulating the hot water piping, you just go down to Corbett's and you can just get the black foam if you wanted to do it yourself, and you could wrap these all up. And then when you're doing new remodels, it's actually required in the code to insulate all your piping anyway.
You mentioned that the heat pump takes heat from the ambient and the air in the surrounding area. Our garage is really cold in the winter. So where's it going to get the heat from to operate, and then will it just be less efficient in the winter?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the reality though is that, with our climate here in Marin County, even though it feels really cold to us, it may not feel cold to the heat pump water heater, right? Which is, we're still, very much above zero, and there is heat that it can amplify. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And they even work in colder climates than ours. There are some heat pump systems that are specially designed for cold weather heat pumps. Lots of people in Canada have heat pumps.
Do we have any other questions for the live audience? Nope, doesn't look like it. And online, I think last call for online questions. Nope. We haven't. Well, thank you very much for coming. We really, it's really good to see this many people interested in at least considering one. As you heard tonight, experiences can vary. So get a good contractor, get multiple quotes, make sure you get a permit. And yeah, so you can't get the rebates unless you go through the formal steps of getting the permit and getting a contractor who's licensed. So that's obvious, but it bears saying. But yeah, it's really, I hope everybody got something out of this. I did actually. I learned a lot tonight. It was really good. Thank you very much to Mark for coming and sharing his wisdom. Also Scott with his experience and Scotty as well, and to all of you for showing up. There are some flyers on the back table there and still on the screen. I'm sure you're all seeing, those of you who are online, there's a lot of resources available from these organizations as well, from the Corte, as well as from the Corte Madera website as well. So and we'll be posting the presentation on the town's YouTube page. So if anybody wants to watch it again, go for it. Good. Well, with that, thank you very much. We do have some refreshments here, so feel free to help yourself, and thanks for coming.